I'm Kate from Presley and welcome to another video on how to do stuff in PR. So today we're going to talk about event press releases and just briefly go through what makes them different from a regular press release, and we'll also look at some real life examples from event press releases that have gone out very successfully. Oh, and just while I have you, if you're someone who prefers the written word rather than listening to me yammer on, we do also have a written guide on event press releases, and that includes things like a template, a bit more information on what goes into a press release like this, and a few more examples that aren't included in this video. So if you'd like to have a look, I'll just link it in the description below. In essence, an event press release is not super different from a regular press release. It's just that it contains certain elements that you wouldn't think to include necessarily in a regular press release if you're talking about, say, a product or something like this. And it's also usually a lot more visual, and there are some details that you really need to have in there. So let's take a look. In my example that I've put together, you can see straight away I've led with a big banner image that's just very eye-catching. And from there, I've tried to keep things pretty concise. I've used the usual press release best practice, which is to keep things concise, keep things short, including using things like bullet points, and try to get to the point quickly. So here, not a super inspired headline, but it does what it says on the tin: TRICFest 2025 dates announced. And immediately you can see that early bird tickets go on sale next week. That is my news here. What is different about this from a regular press release is that you want to mention really prominently when your event is taking place, where it's taking place, and how people can get involved. So here I've got bullet points for the festival dates and for the location. To help entice people to this event, I'm going to also go with the angle of the headliner because I'm pretending this is a great big festival. So I've given some information about the headliner, including teasing some exclusive opportunities for people to get involved and maybe have an interview with the headliner to help spread the word. What I also want to do at this point is to include some more visuals, again, because we're still trying to sell it, we're trying to get the feeling of the event across, and this goes especially well for things like festivals versus, say, business events, but with business events, like, you'd still want to have some headshots of the keynote speakers, right? And what I've done here as well is included a link to a full press kit, so that if people need more media assets, they're able to just click through and go there. Okay, the next super important thing for events is give people a way to get involved. So whether it is a free event or a paid event, there's usually ticketing involved. You'll want to know the numbers around who signed up to it. So here we've included a very clear table with all of the information that is to do with tickets, including pricing, which is super important. And from there, we sort of go back to the generic press release elements that you'll see everywhere. So here we've got a quote, which works as social proof for anyone who is thinking about this event. We just want them to have a voice of authority telling them that it's going to be a good time and they should sign up. If this was an event that had happened before, or one that has had previews. So for example, if I was putting on a play that had some preview nights, here I could include some of the reviews from the critics involved in that, some of the star ratings, things like that. And of course, after that, I just want to include boilerplate with a bit more background information, as well as a media contact that people can get in touch with if they want more info or to get involved in those exclusive opportunities. You'll be surprised how many people leave the contact details off, so that is why I mentioned them now. Some of the other things you might want to include for events are things like if there's someone sponsoring the event, or if there's information about previous events in the same series or about companies involved, opportunities, anything like this. You'd want to get those in there, but overall you want to keep it quite concise, pared back. You just want people to understand what's happening and get more information, get tickets. So before we go on to look at some of the real life examples, one thing to mention is with events, there's quite a long timeline where you can release different press releases. And that can also be to different audiences, right? So at the start, if again, we take the festival as an example, before you even have the date, before you have the headliners, you can start teasing the event. Then when you have those details, you can do another round of announcements, another round of press releases, and you might want to split it up by whether you're sending those to a journalist or if you're involving some influencers or if you're wanting it to go out on your newswire and just be published as is and so be more accessible by the general public. The other side of event press releases is that you'll have at least one press release before the event and at least one after, just to summarize how the event went, how people felt about it, as well as to share any media assets you get from that, whether that's media reviews or images, like image galleries, videos, recordings, anything like that. So that also goes for online events. So if you've had a webinar, you probably want people to be able to access the webinar recording after the fact and maybe capture their email addresses so that you can get them involved next time you have some news coming out. Okay, shall we look at those examples? Okay, so for our first real life example, this is from Light and Life, and they are announcing a music event. Theirs looks a little bit more slick-minded. But you can see what's cool is for that banner image, which you want to be very eye-catching, they've just used the poster for their event. So immediately you can see who is involved, and if you recognize David, then immediately you'll be like, great, my attention is caught. And you also already have the pertinent details around when it's happening, where it's happening. And again, like even though I can see that there's a big wall of text giving us details coming up, I can tell from the headline, from the description, and from that very first intro line here, everything I need to know to understand whether or not I'm interested in this story or if this is going straight to me as a consumer, if I'm interested in this event. So I can see who is doing the announcing, when the event is taking place, who's going to be there, and I can see when the tickets go on sale, and immediately, instead of starting with that flavor text, it's giving me a way to go and purchase those tickets. So that's great. Everything after this is just additional information that if I'm a journalist covering this story, I would want to craft my own story. After that wall of text, we go back to this nice sort of little broken down summary, which is really easy to access. And again, we have some flavor coming across through this little gallery of images. So I think this is a really cool example of something that is consumer facing and might be seen by the public, as well as a press release that you would send to a journalist. Okay, another example. So here, Pandogs have sent out not just a press release about one upcoming event. What they've actually done is put together a program of all their upcoming events for the season and sent that out as a single press release. And that's great if you're someone who does do regular events and the audience for those events is quite similar. So here, I'm going to assume we aren't reading in French because my French is terrible. But you can see they've included visuals for every event, as well as a short summary and information, again, super important, on when it's happening and the ticketing. We assume that it's all happening in the same place, so the where is implicit. Here they've left it out. But yeah, for every single one, they've included a series of media assets that you can download and use, a bit of a description, and again, that ticketing information. And that's just made the whole thing super straightforward, easy to scan. And you'll notice that, so where I'm viewing this press release is actually on their newsroom, their online newsroom. And that just means that if they can link to this page from their pitches, from their campaigns, and whenever anyone visits this page, they'll get the most current information. So for example, if suddenly they realize that this €45 price was a misprint and it was actually €55, they could come in here and make that change without then having to repitch any of their contacts, which is just really helpful. Okay, so this example is from Belfry Theatre. I thought this was an interesting one to include because it can be a bit weird with something like a theatrical release, because instead of having just a one-off event, it's something that recurs over a time period. But I'm still seeing that as an event because it has all the standard elements of like where it's happening. You probably have to be there in person. It has ticketing involved. It usually has famous actors that you want to highlight. And I think the nice thing about theatrical releases is you can see here, especially after it's started to run, you have a lot more opportunity for social proof. If you've run previews and you've had the critics respond to the show, you can already craft a new press release that has that information in there. So here you can see that they've included a lot of quotes about how the show actually went. Okay, here's an example from the Belfry Theatre, and this is a press release announcing their event, which of course is a theatrical performance which lasts a whole show run and not just a single day. So I thought it was interesting to include here and give you a bit of an idea of how that might look when compared to something like a one-off business event. So here you can see they've led with a captivating image. And what's really nice about this one is clearly they've had their previews already go out. So they were able to get feedback from the critics who saw the play and include those reviews in this press release, which is going to help add social proof to anyone who receives it. Another thing about theatrical press releases is that you also usually have quite a big cast involved. So here, as you can see, like they've chosen to list those cast members. After that, they've gone through and really gone into a lot of detail about all the ways that you can be involved with this play, even including things like podcasts, after play discussions, everything else. As we said before, ticketing information is really important, so they've done it really well here. They've linked to where you can physically purchase the tickets, as well as given some information about discounts and things like that. And of course, after that, the final performance schedule, so you know exactly when those tickets are available. In terms of media, because this is a very visual thing, and because they've already run their previews and they were able to film some content for that, it's really nice that they've included the trailer for their play, as well as a gallery. And you'll see that below the gallery, they've also included a PDF of the program. So if someone is interested and they want to get a bit more information on, say, the cast or the story, they're able to download that. And finally, they included a press contact, which is always great. Great to see. They didn't forget that. Okay, so that is it for our press release examples. Hopefully you've got a good idea now of the sort of things that you can include in your own event press release when you're ready to write it. And if you are ready to write it now, come on over to Pressly.com and sign up for a free trial. It's a 2-week free trial. We don't ask for any payment details up front. You'll also have access to a tool, a CRM that helps you manage your contacts, and also a pitching tool so you can immediately start sending that press release from there. All the examples we had a look at were built in Pressly, so the press release you can make is fully multimedia with galleries, with YouTube embeds, social media embeds, tables, whatever you like, and you just start going from there. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.